I was sitting alone that Saturday, sipping coffee in silence. My partner had gone out of town for work, and the house felt too quiet. That's when the doorbell rang. It was my cousin, Arif. We hadn't seen each other in over 5 years. He said he was in the city for a last-minute meeting and thought he'd drop by since he was nearby. I welcomed him in, surprised but happy to see a familiar face. We used to be close as kids, shared holidays, childhood secrets, but life had distanced us. He looked more mature, confident, and carried himself differently than I remembered. We sat down, and soon enough, laughter filled the living room as we recalled silly memories. It was refreshing. I realized how much I missed being around someone who just got me. The conversation flowed easily. He noticed my partner's photo on the shelf and asked about my relationship. I said things were fine, normal. That was a lie. We hadn't really connected in months. It was all routine now, no spark, just coexisting. Arif picked up on that, I think. He listened intently, made me feel heard in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. We kept talking into the evening. He offered to cook something simple. I laughed, surprised he remembered how to make my favorite spicy noodles. I let him take over the kitchen while I set the table. It was domestic but oddly intimate. After dinner, I noticed the way his gaze lingered, just a second too long. It caught me off guard. We moved to the couch again, but the mood had subtly shifted. He started talking about how isolating life had become for him. His voice softened. He said he'd always felt connected to me in a way he couldn't explain. I thought he was joking, maybe teasing. But he wasn't smiling. There was a long pause between us. My heart started to race. I shifted in my seat, trying to lighten the mood. "It's getting late, you should rest," I said casually. He nodded but didn't move. Something in the air had changed, tension now, where comfort used to be. Still, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to overthink it. Maybe it was nothing. He eventually went to the guest room, and I closed the door to mine. But I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. His words echoed in my mind. Was I imagining things? Or had something between us actually shifted? I didn't want to believe it. He was family. But something deep in my gut told me that the line had already started to blur, and I hadn't stopped it. The next morning, everything felt normal on the surface. Arif greeted me with a smile and made coffee like nothing had happened, but I could feel the undercurrent. Something had shifted. I kept telling myself it was just in my head, that I was overanalyzing. But then, as I handed him his mug, his fingers brushed against mine and lingered. Not by accident. I pulled back quickly, but he didn't apologize. He just looked at me in a way that made my chest tighten. We sat quietly for a while, the air between us thick. Then he spoke. He said he felt something last night, something real, and he wasn't sure I didn't feel it too. I froze. My mind raced. I told him he was confused, that this was wrong, but I couldn't keep my voice steady. He didn't push further, but he didn't deny what he said either. Instead, he asked me if I was happy. Not just in general, he meant in my relationship. I hesitated too long before answering. I said I was, but we both knew I wasn't convincing. He didn't smile or gloat. He just nodded like he understood. He said sometimes people end up with someone out of habit, not love. That cut deep because it felt true. I hated that he saw right through me. The day went on quietly, but my thoughts didn't. Every word, every look felt loaded. My partner called to check in, and I kept the conversation short. Guilt was already taking root. Later that evening, Arif sat beside me and brought up how disconnected he'd felt for years. He spoke of heartbreak, of betrayal, of losing trust in people. He said being here reminded him of something pure, something he thought he lost. He was referring to me. I wanted to stop him, but I didn't. A part of me needed to hear those words, needed to feel wanted again. He reached for my hand. I didn't pull away this time. I just stared at our hands intertwined, my heart thudding against my ribs. Then, without warning, he leaned in. I froze. He was inches away, waiting, not forcing. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to push him away, to say no, but I didn't. I turned my head at the last second, and the moment passed. He pulled back, whispered that he was sorry, and left the room. I was left there, shaking, ashamed, not because of him, but because I hadn't stopped it sooner. The boundary had nearly vanished, and it was partly my fault. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how easily it all happened, how someone I considered family had almost crossed a line, and how I had almost let him. The guilt pressed down hard, but there was something else too, something I didn't want to admit. Part of me had felt alive again, and that scared me more than anything else. In the days that followed, we kept our distance, but the silence between us said more than words ever could. He didn't bring up what happened, and I pretended to move past it, but we both knew the tension hadn't disappeared. One evening, I got a message from him after he left the city. It was short. "I shouldn't have done that, but I can't stop thinking about you." I should have ignored it. I should have blocked him. Instead, I replied. That single reply was the beginning of everything unraveling. We started messaging every day. At first, it was innocent, just casual updates checking in, but it didn't stay that way. The compliments returned, and so did the emotional confessions. He said things I hadn't heard in years. He noticed the way I wrote, how I thought, how I felt. My partner never asked me those kinds of questions anymore. I convinced myself it was harmless. It was just texting. But deep down, I knew I was lying. The messages turned into calls. Long, late-night conversations that made me laugh, made me feel understood, made me forget the world I was actually living in. I started pulling away from my partner, emotionally first, then physically. I began lying about small things, where I was going, who I was meeting. I met Arav again, this time deliberately. We had lunch, talked about nothing and everything. When we walked back to the car, he kissed me. I didn't resist. I let it happen. I even kissed him back. From there, the emotional affair turned into something more. We never labeled it, never said it out loud, but we knew exactly what it was. I started living two lives, pretending at home while chasing something forbidden in secret. Every stolen moment felt like a relief and a punishment all at once. There were times I wanted to stop, to cut him off and confess everything, but I didn't. I held on to it like it was the only thing keeping me afloat. He told me he was falling in love with me. I didn't say it back, but the silence between us was loud. I don't know if I felt the same, or if I was just clinging to the idea of feeling wanted again. The affair became the center of my world, even though it was built on betrayal. Every time I came home, I avoided eye contact with my partner. He noticed my distance, the coldness, but didn't push. Maybe he was in denial too. I started questioning everything. My relationship, my choices, even who I had become. I had always seen infidelity as black and white. Now I was drowning in gray. I kept telling myself I would stop before it went too far, but it already had. I was no longer the person I used to be. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I regretted it. At least, not yet. It didn't last. Secrets never do. One evening, while I was in the shower, my partner picked up my phone and saw the notifications. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just walked out of the house and didn't return that night. When he came back the next morning, he was calm. Too calm. He asked me one question. Is it true? I couldn't lie anymore. I nodded. That was it. No more words. The silence was more painful than any argument could have been. He moved out within a week. I didn't beg him to stay. I had already broken us long before he discovered the truth. I called Arav and told him what happened. He said he'd be there for me, but his voice didn't sound reassuring. It sounded unsure. When I asked him what this meant for us now, he hesitated. Then he admitted he didn't expect it to get this real, this fast. I realized something in that moment. He never wanted a future with me. He just wanted the thrill. I was devastated, not just from losing my partner, but from realizing how little all of this meant to Arav. He became distant, started replying less, stopped calling. Eventually, he stopped altogether. I had thrown away a stable relationship for a temporary escape. And now, I was left with nothing, no partner, no affair, just guilt. I tried to reach out to him one last time, hoping for clarity, maybe closure. He read the message and never replied. That silence became my answer. Days turned into weeks. I tried distracting myself with work, friends, anything to fill the space that used to be full of connection. But the guilt sat heavy, a constant reminder of what I'd done. I wasn't the victim. I had made every choice freely, knowing what was at stake. I betrayed someone who trusted me, someone who didn't deserve it. I broke a bond that had taken years to build for something that vanished the moment it faced reality. I started therapy. At first, just to cope. But then, it became the only place I could be honest with myself. I unpacked everything. The emotional neglect in my relationship, the choices I made out of loneliness, and the attention I mistook for love. It hurt. Healing always does. But slowly, I started forgiving myself, not for what I did, but for staying lost in it for so long. Months passed. I never saw Arv again. He disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. I don't hate him. He didn't force me. I was complicit in every step. But I don't miss him either. What I miss is the version of myself I used to be before all of this. Trusting, loyal, clear-headed. That version may be gone, but I'm learning to rebuild something stronger in her place. This wasn't a love story. It was a wake-up call. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from others. It comes from within. And the hardest part isn't losing someone else. It's facing who you become when no one's watching.